The guy who takes the break always outperforms the guy that doesn't. And he's like, how do you cut more wood than me? He's like, well, I go home and I sharpen my axe. You host 2 different podcasts. So we've got Wild Encounters that you've had before the VBMA podcast and now getting into the VBMA podcast. What are your goals with either of them? What are you hoping to do?
So I'll start with the VBMA one, just because that has kind of more set goals to it.
Yeah.
The VBMA podcast I did, 1, because I love talking to people and making podcasts. 2, I think we really need to put more quality information out there for students to hear, whether that be how to buy practice, what a profit and loss statement is, what your investment portfolio is, if vets know what investment portfolios are, some don't. My goal for that is to provide quality and knowledgeable content to students and even veterinarians to actually learn and be able to grow in the field, and talk about things like we're talking about. Be able to kind of encourage people to become excited again about the field that they work in and all these opportunities. Get people on that talk about various opportunities. Like there's a podcast called the Veterinary Success Podcast with Isaiah Douglas.
Okay.
And it's one of my favorite veterinary podcasts out there because he talks with all of these crazy people in the field about veterinary opportunities, like veterinary architects, like you talk to dictation people about like what does dictation look like in the future, and just providing content. So you're going to be giving people opportunities hopefully with these upcoming episodes that they didn't even know were possible. And maybe office managers will listen to it and be like,
right,
maybe we should do that, or we should look into it. That's my goal at the VBMA.
Yeah.
I really just want to provide content. My other podcast, Wild Encounters, I'd always really, again, say it a million times, I like talking to people, but I really like hearing people's stories. I really like hearing like where people are from, how they got to what they're doing and what they're currently active in. And with that podcast, it was more like me being in COVID, being like, I need to do something. And I'd always thought about starting a podcast, but I was like, I don't know. And I talked to a guy that does podcasts a lot, and he showed me the ropes. And I just started talking to these people around the world that play or do or work with crazy animals. And I was just getting their stories. Like my most recent one was with a veterinary astronaut. Like he was telling me all about his travels to space, and he's a veterinarian. I was like, how did you do that? Like that's my childhood dream and then my current dream mushed together. Give me the details. And I tell my girlfriend, like, I want to go to space now. She's like, well, how long will you be gone for? And I'm like, listen, it doesn't matter. Like, it's fine. But that long-term goal for that podcast is I want to keep it going as much as I can, just because I think it's really cool to hear people's unique stories from like Australia, New Zealand, Europe, wherever, and just talking about their fun stories with animals, because I think it brings light to the situation. I would love to make a Wild Encounters TV show one day, though, where I go to those people where I talked with and do the things with them. I don't know. There's a lady that dives with sharks. Might have to talk with her. Might want to reconsider that. But those types of things, just more for fun. That's more for strictly hobby purposes.
Yeah. No, that's really cool because I think it's that's one of those things that from a production perspective is really reinvigorating. Because if you're going through that, right, it's like you're not doing it for to monetize necessarily. Like if that happens, great. But if not, it's okay too, because it's really fulfilling to go through that process of just learning about somebody else's experience, because it's just flat out interesting. And it's like, man, I just have more energy because this person just basically installed it into me by sharing who it is that they are and what it is that they do. So yeah, as much as it takes time and effort to coordinate, schedule, actually produce, edit, post, actually create a following, all that stuff, it's one of those things that in the last podcast, which is going live as it's Thursday and it's happening like right now roughly, I talked to Rebecca and Amy, who are both third-year MSU vet students, and they have a big involvement with the house system that they have over there. And they were like, I spent all this time that I should have spent studying, but I spent all this time on the house system because I really cared about it. And I was like, yeah. And did you lose out on any of your schoolwork? Well, no. It's because you did the schoolwork process faster because you had more energy to actually get it done. Simon Sinek, if you are unfamiliar, we actually talked about him on the VBMA podcast. He just posted a video a couple days ago. There's a parable about two lumberjacks that they go out into the woods 9 hours a day, and one of them just cuts wood 9 hours a day, and one of them leaves in the middle of the day and for an hour, so he's only cutting for 8 hours, and the other lumberjack goes up to him after a few years of getting completely outperformed. The guy who takes the break always outperforms the guy that doesn't. And he's like, how do you cut more wood than me? He's like, well, I go home and I sharpen my axe. Like, it's not that hard. Like, just take the time to do it right. And you need energy to do that. So it's awesome that you've been able to basically get over the hurdle of that, especially that first couple. You know, it's frightening to start an adventure like that. But if it is something that you have in the front of your mind and you just have to get out into the world, like, that's my biggest piece of advice. You just go out and do it, because even if 3 people listen to it, you got to go through that creative process, and there's a lot more juice to follow it. Thanks for checking out this clip from the PAWCast Veterinary Podcast. If you are interested in watching this full episode, you can go ahead and find that right here. And if you're ready to be the force of change in veterinary medicine, go ahead and click subscribe right here to learn more. Thanks.